do this 7 minutes a day until April 1st. We start on Monday, March 10th.
Mark Carney will succeed Justin Trudeau as Canada's next prime minister. Official results on Sunday showed the former central banker won the race to become leader of the country's ruling Liberal Party. Carney will take over at a tumultuous time in Canada. A general election lies in the near future, and the country is in the midst of a trade war with longtime ally the United States under President Donald Trump, whom Carney name-checked after being announced as the party's leader.
There's someone who's trying to weaken our economy.
Of course. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
And Donald Trump, as we know, has put, as the Prime Minister just said, unjustified tariffs on what we build, on what we sell, on how we make a living.
Oh, really?
He's attacking Canadian families, workers, and businesses, and we cannot let him succeed.
I'm sorry. I did not want to start today's show by vomiting, but it looks like that's what was on the order for the day. That is the, I don't know if he's been officially appointed. The anointed in the title was not a typo. The only thing that might have been a typo is if it has two N's versus one N. And I'm pretty sure it only has one N, but I hope that wasn't an actual typo, which led people to think I meant I meant anointed. We have an elected, anointed new prime minister who is now ruling over 38 million people because of the votes of 152,000 registered liberals. And as we're going to get to it in a second, because Ezra Levant is in the backdrop and going to have an amazing discussion. X is down, people. And you know the poo-poo has to be hitting the fan if X is down and has been down for now going on 3 hours. I would say it's been the best 3 hours of my life, but I just realized all of my contact information of people that I exchange with on Twitter, my footnotes, bookmarks, images on Twitter. So it'll be back soon, but we're not currently live on Twitter. And before we bring in Ezra, when we're talking about stuff that makes you angry in life, you got to talk about the stuff that will make you healthy in life, people. Our two sponsors of today's show, we got Rumble Premium and Brickhouse Nutrition Field of Greens, people. Americans' confidence in healthcare has hit a 24-year low. There's new administration and changes on the horizon, but it takes time for the trust to be regained and MAHA to take effect. That's why we're taking control of our own health now with Field of Greens. We all know that eating healthy is key to staying healthy. Eat healthy, exercise, eat vegetables, and most people don't do it. Life gets busy, and you find reasons not to do it or are just unable to do it, and that's where Field of Greens comes in. Where's my Field of Greens? Right here. Bada bing, bada boom. Every spoonful, people, has one serving of fruits and vegetables. Every fruit and vegetable in Field of Greens is doctor selected for specific health benefits. There's the heart group, the lung group, the kidney group, and the metabolism group, even healthy weight management. Field of Greens promises that you'll notice better health at your next checkup or you get your money back. We've got a 20% discount for all of us over at Viva Frei community. Head over to fieldofgreens.com. Use code VIVA. 20% off. That is fieldofgreens.com. It's delicious. It's healthy. Swap out an unhealthy habit for a healthy habit. And speaking of healthy habits and that wonderful thing called free speech, people, Rumble Premium, if you want to support Rumble, because free speech is under attack. Rumble refuses to back down. We've seen Chris Pavlovsky walking the walk and talking the talk, not doing business in the countries that want him to violate his fundamental principle of freedom of speech. We've always believed in empowering voices, no matter how unpopular, and now we're taking that fight to the next level. When major advertisers conspired to pull their dollars from advertising on Rumble, not to mention any names, Dunkin' Donuts, who thought that there was too much of a right-wing culture on Rumble to patronize their business dollars. We're not here to fit the mold. We are here to defend free expression, freedom of speech, and the creators who abide by those principles. To strengthen this mission, we're excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and creators. You'll find exclusive content from creators like Russell Brand, Dr. Disrespect, Tim Cass, Mug Club. We focus our stuff on locals, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. But get a subscription. It supports free speech. Your voice matters. To join Rumble Premium. If you can't do it, by the way, if you can't join Rumble Premium, not everybody can. Continue watching on Rumble. That's how you do it. But if you can, $10 a month, you get $10 off if you get the annual subscription. Promo code VIVA10. Go to rumble.com/premium/VIVA10 to claim your discount. Today, together, we will turn the tide I say it's already turning. Free speech is getting popular, cool, and economical again, and Rumble was ahead of the curve. Whether you join Rumble Premium or just keep watching, you support free speech and help keep it alive. Thank you very much. And now, speaking of free speech and the tyrannical hellhole that is Canada. I'm sorry, I feel bad. I don't want to put Ezra. Look, Ezra is fighting the fight, the good fight, from behind the Maple Gulag, the Iron Rainbow. If you don't know who Ezra is, I don't know where you've been. And if you don't watch Rebel News, you should. Ezra, I'm bringing you in. 3, 2, 1. Sir, how goes the battle?
It's very interesting. Let me just say that neutral phrase. It's interesting. As you mentioned yesterday, we had a new leader selected for us, Mark Carney. It's almost a two typecast. If you heard, if some Hollywood studio saw the script, they'd say, "Nah, it's too on the nose." You mean someone who was friends with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's procurer? No, too much. Someone who left Canada, hasn't lived in Canada for years, has 3 passports and is a citizen of the world. No, too much. Someone who was the globalist banker for the central bank in the UK and then went into banking and forced ESG, environmentalism, into every other bank he could. No, too on the nose. And if you thought this guy on the board of the WEF, Klaus Schwab, boasting to "We will penetrate the cabinets." And I know I'm saying that in a German accent because that's how Klaus Schwab, the supervillain, speaks. And if I said to you that his wife didn't even bother leaving their home in New York to come up to Canada until yesterday, you know, they don't even live in Canada. And suddenly he is the leader of the Liberal Party. He's not yet sworn in as prime minister, but that'll happen soon. Let me throw one more thing at you. This selection that happened yesterday, there were 400,000 people who registered to vote in the Liberal vote. 400,000. That's a respectable number. That's 1% of Canadians. But only about 150, 160,000 of those votes were verified, were validated. 2/3 of those who registered to vote were not validated, were not verified. Now, I don't know if they were bots, if they were some sort of fraud, if there were too many people signing up from the same household. We have not been told. But Viva, if I were to tell you that your local town election for mayor, if I were to tell you that 2/3 of the ballots were thrown out, but trust us, the winner of the remaining third is this guy, you'd say, whoa, normally 1 or 2%, a few percent, you get it, spoiled ballots. But if I were to tell you that the vast majority of ballots weren't even let in, weren't even counted, you'd say that's pretty weird. And then if I threw one more angle at you, you could be a foreign national and vote. You didn't have to be a Canadian citizen. You had to be a permanent resident, but you could be as young as 14 years old. So you could be a 14-year-old child. Mm-hmm. You could be a foreign citizen. And yet 2/3 of them were disqualified. And if I told you the result of that process is chosen our prime minister, welcome to Canada in 2025.
Ezra, one other thing. I want to get back to the votes and the registered votes. I understand it, but don't understand how it happened. But one more wrench that you didn't throw in. From what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Encryptus, our AI guy, ran this through his AI. They can't even make a motion for non-confidence until government is back in session. And it's only scheduled to be back in session on March 24th. So one way or the other, Carney is going to be the prime minister with the inability to actually trigger a non-confidence, at least until government is back in session.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's actually the biggest issue here. Why did the Liberals swap in the latest, World Economic Forum 2.0? Why did they have Trudeau 2.0 instead of Trudeau 1.0? Because right before he was going to be voted out as prime minister by Parliament, he ran to the Governor General and said, "Please dissolve Parliament before they can get me out." It would be as if on the eve of an impeachment, a U.S. president said, "Yeah, I'm going to lose this impeachment vote. What if I just lock all the doors in Congress and don't let them back in for 3 months?" That's exactly what Trudeau did in January. So you're so right. Mark Carney will become prime minister without ever winning a real election, and no one can stop him because Trudeau had the country prorogued. Now, I suppose if Carney is the new prime minister, he can say to the Governor General, "All right, we're going to unsuspend Parliament." But this is all, it's all a kind of a coup. What do you call it when party insiders select a foreigner with 3 passports who lives and works in New York? What do you call that person when they're selected as prime minister by merely winning an internal party vote? Is that a coup? Is that a soft coup? Is that a Canadian style coup? I don't know what it is, but it ain't democracy.
It's nothing shy of a coup, but also now you mentioned having prorogued Parliament, or that, and that he could in theory call Parliament back, and then it brings the emphasis back to the lawsuit that was filed by the JCCF, where they contested the prorogation of Parliament. And back when Boris Johnson prorogued Parliament in the context of the Brexit vote, they found a way to declare his prorogation of Parliament unlawful, and they said it's as though they never prorogued and they've been convened, get back to work. This was dismissed in Canada. The lawsuit was dismissed, and by the time any appeal is heard, the delay will have expired. But now it sort of also highlights the corruption of not declaring unlawful the prorogation. So at the very least, the minute after Carney is sworn in, if Jagmeet Singh wants to find his soul, they can file a motion or whatever, submit a motion for non-confidence and pass it and trigger a new election.
Yeah. You know, I'm frustrated. I've talked to John Carpay, and I'm sure you have as well, about his lawsuit about the prorogation. Boris Johnson's prorogation in the United Kingdom that was overturned as illegal was a shorter period of time than the one in Canada, and it was for no worse reason than Trudeau had. My point is, Trudeau's case, if anything, was worse than Boris Johnson's, but Canada is a club, and you ain't in the club. It's a small club of insiders and elites, and going from memory, I think it was the Chief Justice of the federal court that heard the matter. And look, Canada is a closed circuit. We don't have many of the checks and balances that the United States have. We don't even vet our judges. Our Senate, I don't know if our American viewers know this, but our Canadian Senate is appointed. There were 5 vacancies. Trudeau stacked them all in his final hours as PM. 5 Senate seats. There's only 104 Senate seats altogether. It just the arrogance, and he's announcing more foreign aid. He's announcing billions of dollars in schemes and grants, like a Gavin Newsom style high-speed train. He just announced that in the last week. We have some of the weakest checks and balances of any G7 country, and it is showing very much right now.
I feel bad. I mean, I wouldn't want to be there. I'm not there. It's sad to see it happening from here. I mean, for everyday people, like, they don't really notice anything changing, and yet it's monumental changes that are happening incrementally. And by the time they know it, they're going to be locked up in jail for social media posts like you see in the UK. But before I even forget, actually, so the Carney vote, they said it was registered Liberals who had the right to vote. I understand that there were 400,000 who registered, and then they only accepted 152,000. Do you know the modalities of this? Because I just didn't have time to get into it.
No, and they won't say who made, like, by the way, to check 400,000, that's a big job. Did you do it? How did you do it? How did you check 400,000 registrations? And who did it? And was it some sort of machine? Like, I don't believe that they look through 400,000 registrations manually. I just don't think they had the time. So what was the system? What was the algorithm, so to speak? Were people involved? Who were the people involved? Did they outsource this to some, I don't know, some accounting firm or some tech firm? We don't have those answers. And it's not just an internal Liberal Party thing. The winner of this system is becoming our PM. Let me ask you a question. When it comes to the world's best or worst hackers, we can think the United States and their NSA, Israel, I would probably put in there, North Korea, and the People's Republic of China. I might put Iran in there also. Well,
I'd put India in there as well, but that
sure, yeah. And I mean, I'm just saying who.
Oh, no, I'm joking.
No, well, all of those different countries, their military weaponized hackers, their cyber battalions. I don't know what they're called. In China, they actually have a special name for their. In the U.S., it's the NSA. Would they have? Think of the means, the
motive and
motivation, yeah, and the opportunity means. But that's right. Did they have the means? Absolutely. You're saying that I bet a smart kid could hack the Liberal Party of Canada's website. The motive Oh, they have a huge motive. I tell you, Mark Carney is as pro People's Republic of China as anyone. And would they have had the opportunity? Of course they did. So did they do it? Well, we don't know, because we don't know who was it, a consulting firm in charge of it. We don't know any of these things. And yet they chose our new PM. And by the way, there's a track record here in the 2019 election. Our version of the CIA, called CSIS, found that there were 11 federal districts in Canada where the People's Republic of China interfered with the vote. In one case, they bussed in Chinese nationals to vote in a primary for a candidate named Han Dong. They also interfered with Chinese Canadian candidates who were not pro-Beijing. So there are obviously some freedom-loving, pro-Canada Chinese Canadians. They're ethnically Chinese, but they're hostile to Beijing's communism. So in the 2019 election, according to CSIS, our CIA, the Chinese operation was to harm the pro-Canada Chinese Canadians and to boost the pro-PRC Chinese Canadians and others. So we know China has a real keen interest in Canada. It would actually sort of be nuts if they didn't try to game and rig and infiltrate and interfere with an all online system. It's begging China to interfere.
It's just so people also appreciate, 152,000 votes were counted. Carney, what's the latest? He got 85 or 89%?
I heard 85. I didn't look at the final stats, okay, but around there, high 80s.
High 80s. So we're looking at, like, I will say Putin levels of approval, or at least votes. What's her face? Chrystia Freeland got 8% of the vote last time I checked, and Gould got 1%. And I said this on Bannon this morning, the irony that Trudeau, who just came out and lambasted America for being misogynist for not electing Kamala Harris, the woman, the two women on the Liberal ticket didn't get 10% of the vote to the white man globalist WEF whore.
You know what? There's this neighborhood in Toronto called Yonge Dundas Square. Actually, it's been renamed. They've torn down that name because it's too ethnocentric. Anyways, it's sort of like a Canadian version of Times Square, and we love going down there and doing streeters, vox pop. I bet, in fact, we should do this. I bet if we go down there with a big picture of Mark Carney, I bet you if we show that to 20 people, I bet you that only one or two will know who he is. I mean, if you show your viewers, he looks so nondescript. I've heard him compared to a funeral director, and he's actually a very boring man as well. Fact is, he has not been in Canada in decades. He was a central banker. No one knows. I bet you not 1 in 100 people knows who the current head of the Canadian Central Bank is. Then he went to the UK to be their central banker. And then he went to run a bank, a mini BlackRock, called Brookfield Asset Management. So do you think, Viva, that 1 in 20 Canadians would know who this guy is? I don't. And the reason I mention that is because I'm skeptical that 85% of the Liberal Party of Canada would vote for him. If you couldn't pick him out of a lineup, if he's never run for anything in Canada, if he doesn't live in Canada, he's in New York with his wife, if he is focused on China and globalism, if he's trying to build a little BlackRock called Brookfield, no one in Canada knows who he is.
That might be by design, because I think everybody hates every member of the Liberal Party. Like Karina Gould, you Google Karina Gould, you're going to see her smiling with a Nazi, and I mean that literally. Chrystia Freeland, you're going to get the image of her with the Ukrainian Nazi flag, and so it's almost better. They're like, oh, he looks like a good politician, old, he speaks smoothly. But the reality is, I knew of the name, I knew nothing of Carney until such time as he became the front runner. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Then you find out that he's basically been the right-hand man, or the whispering in the ear of Trudeau on all things policy. Then you find out, we call a lot of people WEF lackeys. This man literally is giving panels at Davos with Bill Gates. He's literally at the annual Bilderberg meeting with Albert Bourla. Do you know what he did in his capacity as chair of the Bank of England? Like, I have an idea, but not a thorough one.
I've heard criticisms of him. The former Prime Minister Liz Truss says he was atrocious, that he led to inflation in the UK, and that really he violated the neutrality of the position by pushing green schemes. That's his big thing. For the last 10 years, his total focus, and you can find 100 interviews of him on YouTube talking about carbon taxes and transitioning off of carbon energy, which basically in Canada means shutting down the oil sands, which are our number one export by value. It's the number one industry in Alberta. And and by the way, Trudeau and his whole team hate the oil sands too. But Carney has spent his whole life fighting against energy, the kind of energy that you and I use. He's a private jet man himself, of course.
Well, even worse, and this is the stuff that I discovered as I was going back and looking at interviews basically 8-10 years back. He was in the news back in Brexit because he was being diplomatic about his opposition to Brexit, because he's such a populist. He can't listen to the word of the people. But Brookfield Asset Management, and you'll get into this. I know you covered this in greater detail. They are simultaneously investing in dirty energy in the countries that don't abide by the policy that he's implementing in Canada. And so he is implementing the crippling policy in Canada while financially benefiting from it through his investment firm in foreign countries. Can you elaborate on that?
I'm so glad you said that. You know, you made me remember something that happened when we were in Davos, Switzerland, for the World Economic Forum just 2 months ago. I don't know if your viewers know, but every year we send a little team to the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. It's sort of tough to get there because they buy up every single hotel room and Airbnb in Davos, which is this little town in the Alps. So we have to stay a town away and get up early every morning and take the train in. They literally buy up the whole town. And of course, we're not accredited media, so we're outside the perimeter. It's like it's a castle and we're peasants on the outside of the wall. But every now and then the drawbridge comes down over the moat and some young prince goes strolling into the city. And the thing is, because there's no other independent journalists in the whole town, there are other journalists, by the way, but they're paying to be there. So CNN is there, CNBC is there. Even Fox Business News is there, but they pay to play. So there's no way they would ever ask a prickly question because they're insiders. They go there for the connections. Anyways, so we're outside the moat and down comes the drawbridge, and he's a very tall guy, so he's very easy to spot. John Kerry. He's the former, Biden's former ambassador for climate change or something like that. Anyhow, I'll give him credit. He actually talks to us as he walks. So this year, let me just tell the story super quick. We always ask him, did you fly here on a private jet? We always ask, and he knows he can't lie because there'll be some proof of it. So he always admits it, and we love that. But I said to him this year, I said, who's paying for you now that Joe Biden's no longer the president? You were working for Biden. Now it's Trump. On whose capacity are you here? Who's your client? I think that's a really fair question to ask. And he resisted it a couple times, and I pressed him, and he admitted it was an NGO set up by a guy named Tom Steyer. Now, your viewers in California will know who Tom Steyer is for sure. He's a billionaire who made his money in coal. Coal, the most carbon intensive energy there is. And I'm pro coal, by the way. I get it every year for Christmas. Coal is the stuff of life. It's what's lifting China and India out of poverty. But imagine the chutzpah of John Kerry being funded by the king of coal. Yeah, that's him right there, Tom Steyer. He had a brief run for president a few years back, and he realized he was getting no support. But he made his money in coal. He's trying to whitewash his climate crimes. Now, that's the same thing. The World Economic Forum has so many private jets and so many private helicopters, and everyone there is on the take in some way, and they have the chutzpah to tell you, turn down the thermostat, take public transit. That's the World Economic Forum, and that's Mark Carney. That's the man who's being installed as Canada's new prime minister.
Well, and see, the hypocrisy is one thing. I want to go at it, and I presume other more in-depth investigative journalists will follow up the absolute corruption of it, because it's one thing to be a hypocrite, and it's another thing to implement policies that you then indirectly benefit from through. You're betting on both ends. You could, in theory, short Canadian companies at Brookfield Assets and then invest in the ones that you know are going to benefit from this overseas or in dirty, polluting countries. And it's not just hypocrisy with Carney, it's thorough corruption. And now he's been anointed prime minister.
Well, that's you. I'm so glad you raised that point, because he has been Justin Trudeau's economic advisor for 5 years, but he has never had to disclose his conflicts of interest. He's never had to divest anything. So he's giving advice to Trudeau while he's running Brookfield Asset Management. And while Brookfield is applying for contracts or grants or other schemes with the Canadian government. So he's on the inside making policy, and while he's on the outside engaging with that policy to make a profit, his loyalty to his pocketbook. There was a bit of a scandal a month ago, a few weeks ago, when his last act as chairman of Brookfield Asset Management before he retired to run, his last act was to vote in a unanimous vote to move Brookfield Asset Management's office from Toronto to New York for tax reasons. So this guy, he's an oligarch, but normally oligarchs have a puppet in office like Justin Trudeau making him rich. He wants to be the politician and the billionaire at the same time. It's sort of gross to see. And to this day, no disclosure, no registering with the Conflict of Interest Commissioner. It really shows the lack of checks and balances in Canada.
And for those who may not be familiar with the scandal, because it came up in the debate where he said he was not involved in the decision to move Brookfield Asset Management from Toronto to New York, and then it turns out he was on the board. He had penned off a letter or whatever. That's scandalous to me, and it'll be easier for the general population to understand from a political point of view. That is the tip of the iceberg as far as his corruption is concerned. It's one thing you take the businesses, of course, it's legal, do it. But it's his making money off both ends of this, that he has literally been advising his own asset management or preemptively knowing. He's the Nancy Pelosi. And a caveat for everyone out there, he's not worth $96 billion. There's an article that sort of that confuses Bloomberg with Carney. We don't know. Do we know what his net worth is?
No, we don't. And I'm going to say, if I had to guess, I would say it's in the hundreds of millions. I don't think he's a billionaire, but he operates in those circles. And but that's how Canada always is. The Bronfman family, who were Justin Trudeau's fundraisers, tax deals to repatriate their money without paying income tax. SNC Lavalin, the recently renamed massive engineering firm, they were caught in a corruption sting in an Ottawa hospital, I think a Montreal hospital. The government wanted to prosecute them for corruption. Justin Trudeau interfered to call off the trial. And you might recall that caused the ouster of Canada's justice minister. She didn't want to tamper with the trial. Trudeau did. They were at odds. Trudeau fired his attorney general because she wanted to prosecute this corrupt firm that was friendly with Trudeau. That's how it rolls in Canada. We don't have a vigorous press. We don't have an enforcement of the rules if you are with the right people. Of course, the justice was going to side with Trudeau against the appeal of the prorogation. It's a small club and you are not in it.
I don't know if this pops up right away when I bring it up. It does. Okay. Brookfield Asset Management, apparently it manages $1 trillion worth of assets. I would say it's not outlandish that Carney's worth over $1 billion, because even they operate on a percentage. We'll I guess we're going to have to find out sooner than later. And if journalists and political opponents know how to do their job, they will try to find that out. The SNC Lavalin, that was Justin Trudeau's second ethics violation. The third one, he skated away from the WEF scandal. Not the WEF. What was it called? The We charity scandal. Sorry.
Right.
So, I mean, Ezra, so what happens now? The next step is they're going to swear in this guy who's going to become, and he's got to move and make Canada his permanent domicile now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where his house is. I know he owns property in different cities. Like I say, he's got 3 different passports. He's got the British passport and the Irish passport, which I don't understand. It's probably a tax thing. There's a lot of companies, as you know, that for tax reasons are based in Ireland, including Facebook and other tech companies, and it's for tax reasons. So this fella who was born in Canada is really a global citizen of the world. And what's sort of gross to me is how they think Canada is like some bauble, some trinket, some collectible. Some oligarchs buy yachts. Some oligarchs get into the spaceship business, at least 3 of them that I know of. Mark Carney wants to collect Canada, and he's getting away with it. Now, I believe that Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives will still win the next election, but it's not a sure thing. I mean, the polls have certainly narrowed, and every single journalist in Canada has a personal pecuniary interest in having the Liberals win, not just the CBC state broadcaster, which Pierre Poilievre has said he will defund, but every, quote, private sector journalist that is subsidized with the journalist subsidy. Again, your American viewers will be shocked to know that about a third of the cost of every print journalist in Canada is paid for by the government. And so every journalist in the back of their mind is saying, if Trudeau doesn't win, I could be out of a job. Mm-hmm. And they are now all going to harmonize around Mark Carney. They don't have to be told what to do. It's like birds making a formation in the sky or fish in a school. They know their instincts are to protect Carney and stop the Conservative.
I've been talking about this for a while. Like it's not just the subsidy for print journalism. Then you have government advertisements, which is in and of itself an industry. COVID's no longer the case, but they'll find other reasons. Right. The Conservatives have said they want to defund the CBC. It's wild captured corruption up in Canada. My question, I've been giving Pierre a hard time, and I'll continue to do so. I mean, what's your assessment on how he's handled this, call it a tariff war, this tiff with Trump's administration?
Well, first of all, let me give you full kudos for holding Pierre Poilievre to account from the libertarian right, which is, I think, a fair way to describe your position, if I may. It's so important that Poilievre not only have critics on the left, he has to be pulled to the right and the left so he can walk a straight line at the very least. And so I support what you do on that. And by the way, I talk to Maxime Bernier from time to time as well. I think my only difference of opinion with you, if I may, is that mathematically, pragmatically, I think there are only 2 people who can be PM in the next election, Poilievre, or so you could say, well, a lesser of 2 evils, or pragmatic. That until we have a proportional representation system, I'm afraid that small principal parties like the PPC in our system, they don't work. Anyway, you can call me too much of a pragmatist and not idealist enough. That's my view. I think Pierre Poilievre is strong. I've known him since he was in his 20s. I've been talking to him for 30 years. He has been consistent on these issues. Has he been as bold, say, as the People's Party on immigration? No, because he's been politically more careful. And until about a month ago, he had a 20-something point lead. And when you've got a 20-point lead in an election year, you be careful. You don't open up new risky adventures because you just got to win. Now things are, and you asked me, let me come back to your question. You said,
actually, sorry, before that even, what are the latest polls showing in terms of difference?
Well, there's a mix. I mean, ECOS, which is a liberal friendly poll, actually showed the Liberals ahead. Abacus, which is slightly less crazy, but tilts a little liberal, shows that the Conservatives have a lead. I think it's about 10 points or so. I don't have it in front of me. Yeah. The pollster I trust the most in Canada is a liberal friendly polling firm called Abacus, run by David Coletto. I trust them because I know Coletto a little bit. I used to be friends with him a long time ago. I know he's ethical and he's intelligent. And why I like them is if they have bad news for the Liberals, I trust it because their instinct is to be liberal, if you take my meaning. So if you Google Abacus or find them on Twitter, you'll see the latest polls. I think the Conservatives are ahead by 10. And I think that may grow. Of course, the Liberals are going to rebound under Mark Carney. No one is as hated in Canada as Trudeau. He has 9.5 years of scandal attached to him. People were sick of his face. So as to your point, Mark Carney is a new guy, and the fact that no one knows him is a plus. The more they get to know him, the more they might not like him, which suggests they might go to the polls early. Pierre Poilievre is in a pickle because if he shows any inclination of being pro-Trump, people will call him disloyal and they'll say, oh, you're for America taking over, you're for America pushing us around. Donald Trump has made it tougher for Canadian Conservatives because his taunting of Trudeau, which was very much Trudeau-centric, it's irritating other Canadians. I mean, I like the trolling. I like the banter. I'm very sympathetic to Trump, and I think I understand that some of that bluster is just his style. but not all Canadians sometimes don't have a sense of humor about things. And I think a lot of Canadians are bewildered, and some have hurt feelings, and some are, finding an occasion to be nationalistic again after years of demonizing our history and culture and patriotism. Suddenly, the Liberals have rediscovered loving Canada again, and all it took was Trump to do it. So Pierre Poilievre's in a pickle. He wants to stand strong for Canada, but he also wants to keep bridges intact so he can negotiate with Trump if he becomes PM. Pierre Poilievre's in a tough pickle. I do think he's going to win, and I think he's got some good ideas on how to strengthen our nationalism, strengthen our military, build other pipelines to the coast so we don't only have to sell oil to America. Things are a lot tougher for Pierre Poilievre now than they were a year ago, that's for sure.
I'll say the one thing about the polls. I don't believe them at all, ever. And that's sort of a self-fulfilling or self-serving prophecy, because they create a big margin so they can then say, oh, look, they've tightened up the margin to manufacture this sort of consent that the Liberals are coming back. I'll say one thing about Pierre is I appreciate that you can't come out and be pro-Trump any more than you can be pro-Putin in Canada. I would just say that strategically, he didn't have to be negative Trump in order to be anti-Trudeau and pro-Canada. And I think it was a silly thing to do, but what's done is done. I think that there will be not scandal. He's not yet known, but I think Carney has actually substantially and substantively much more dirt in the closet that will come out. And that's why I think he's not going to trigger an election anytime soon. So go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but to follow up on your point, when you're in those circles in the UK, we saw him hanging out with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's
Prince Andrew. I mean, he's attending parties at Prince Andrew's after the scandal breaks. And
there's a lot of questions there. And I think that may be one of the reasons why Carney is avoiding journalists who are not part of the regime. Lots of images of them kicking out journalists, not just Rebel News. People say, oh, you're just rough citizen journalists. They're even kicking out more establishment journalists. I think he's going to, like Joe Biden in 2020, he's going to run a campaign of staying in the basement, having very tightly scripted moments. Because there's a lot of questions, and he doesn't seem to be very good at being precise in his answers. Like his answer about moving Brookfield's head office from Toronto to New York, so many little fibs. I think he lies naturally. He's not a great politician in that he's not a great liar. So, let me talk, if I may. You mentioned Trump a few times. Here's what I'm worried about. Canada and the United States are best friends. I'd say it's like Batman and Robin. They're the Batman. They're always going to be the hero, the main character. But we're not just a subsidiary. We're Robin. We wouldn't beat Batman in a fight, but Batman relies on Robin sometimes. That's how I like to phrase it. And culturally, we're similar. Linguistically, we're similar, other than the French quarter of Canada. We're a little more left-wing than America, but we're pretty close. I mean, we're not as left-wing as France. We have so much trade, cultural trade. The border, when we call it the world's longest undefended border, well, it really was. Now, that's a problem now. But what I'm worried about is that Trump had some real beefs about migrants and fentanyl, and he's got real beefs about Canada not pulling our fair share militarily. And so because Trudeau and Trump didn't get along, they started quarreling, and Trump found a line. I don't know did you see Secretary Marco Rubio explain to Catherine Herridge where that whole 51st state thing came from?
No, I didn't.
It was amazing. Marco Rubio says that when Justin Trudeau came down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump about tariffs, Trump said, what would things be like if we didn't have a trade imbalance? Because Canada has a large trade imbalance, mainly because we sell America so much oil. It's just our number one export by far. Mm-hmm. And Trudeau's answer was, well, then we wouldn't exist as a country, which is a crazy thing to say in a high-stakes negotiation with a killer like Donald Trump, because now you've just shown him what you're afraid of. You've shown him what your terror is. You're worried about Canada. Like, who would even say our country would no longer exist? First of all, that's not true. I mean, we might be poor, we might be our country wouldn't exist. Trudeau said those words. That's like that movie Inception. You just put the idea in Trump's mind. And so for the rest of time, Trump is using that thing because he knows it pokes at a soft spot in Trudeau. Trouble is, other Canadians have that soft spot too. We like to think we're tough and strong, but that we have a bit of an inferiority complex. Robin always does when he's comparing himself in the mirror to Batman. And so I'm worried that Trump really going after Trudeau had collateral damage. And I don't know how Trump's going to get along with Carney, but I think we've got to stay friends with America for a whole bunch of obvious reasons. And I actually have an idea that I'm trying to, speaking of inception, I'm trying to get this idea taking root in America First Americans. Can I tell you my idea?
Please. I want to see if I can guess it beforehand, but I'll wait till.
Sure.
I'll pretend I knew what it was after you say it.
I'm originally from Alberta, which is the oil and gas province. It's sort of like the Texas of America. It's also the most pro-American place in Canada. And there's actually a lot of Americans there who helped develop the oil and gas industry. That's where Canada's oil sands are. Now, I think it might surprise some Americans that the Canadian oil sands have more oil than any other place in the world other than Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. We're number 3 in the world for proven reserves. I think that might surprise people. And we're actually the number 1 source of foreign oil for America. America burns, rough numbers, 20 million barrels a day, but it only makes, rough numbers, 13 million barrels a day. So where's the gap coming from? Well, thankfully, Canada's there to take care of half of it, but the USA is still importing conflict oil from OPEC. And God forbid you shut off that Canadian ethical oil, you'd have to buy that oil from somewhere. I know America's ramping up its production, but you can't just add 1 million barrels a day just by snapping your fingers. So by putting the tariffs on Canadian oil, it doesn't work. Tariffs, if you can move a factory from the Honda factory that just moved from Mexico to the United States, I get it. You can move a factory, but you can't move the oil sands. They're where they are. So a tariff isn't going to have the beneficial effect of bringing production to America. It's going to stay in Alberta. All you're doing is you're putting the price of that oil up for American refineries. And by the way, the companies producing that oil sands oil in Alberta, a lot of them are American or Canadian companies with a lot of American investors. What's my point? Don't push away the Canadian oil, which is the source of a lot of that trade imbalance because we sell so much oil to America. Don't push it away. First of all, you want that oil. It's better than conflict oil from OPEC. Second of all, you don't want that oil to go to China. If Canada can't sell its oil to America, God forbid, well, we would sell it to other customers. And I like Japan and I like Korea and I like India. I don't want China snapping up the oil sands. I'd much rather have America do it. And finally, if you actually take the opposite approach, think like a real estate developer. Pretend you're a big, larger than life Manhattan real estate developer who has thought out loud of buying Greenland and Panama and even Gaza. Maybe look at it like a huge real estate deal of the century. Maybe you say, okay, if Alberta doubles its production of oil sands oil, like doubles it, that's enough to replace all the OPEC imports to America. So instead of pushing away oil sands oil, pull it close. You don't need to annex Canada. Just sign a 50-year, $13 trillion deal to buy every drop of oil for the next 50 years, completely displacing foreign oil, and make such a good deal for Canada that they now have money to rebuild their military. Don't push Canadian oil away. Pull it tight, close to you. You don't need to annex anything. You don't need another California in the Electoral College. You don't need to handle the French bilingualism thing. Just get the good stuff. Get the oil. Everyone's a winner. Make America great again. The biggest real estate deal imaginable. You know, the amount of oil in the oil sands is staggering. It's many times more than what America has totally. The smart MAGA move is to buy as much oil sands oil as can be pumped. That's my suggestion to my Trumpy friends in the States. And I love Trump, and it's tough to love Trump in Canada these days, but I do. And I want him to love Canada as a deal of the century. That's my thesis. I wrote a book, Deal of the Century.
Oh, wait, well, first of all, that is a newly released book that you've...
Yeah, it just went for sale a week ago and I had an op-ed about it in the Wall Street Journal. People like the idea, and they say, yeah, that's sort of the America First approach. Don't push away the Canadian oil, pull it in.
Well, I'm going to pull that up in a second, but is that theory not predicated on Alberta's ability to produce oil out of the oil sands, which is being hampered, to say the least, by the federal government. So maybe this is a question of demoralizing the Liberal Party, bringing it out. Maybe Carney coming in, he'll be more amenable to making a deal with Trump. He's already talking about axing the tax. But maybe that was the way that Trump gets to that solution. But hitherto, the Liberals have been pretty tough on Alberta's ability to freely operate.
They have been, and the Canadian Liberal Party has canceled the pipeline to the West Coast called the Northern Gateway, and has canceled a pipeline to the East Coast called Energy East. But there's another pipeline that was actually approved in Canada, and construction went forward very well until Obama killed it. It's called the Keystone XL pipeline. They actually built a lot of it, including the part that crosses the border. That pipeline can hold about 800,000 barrels a day, which is so much. That would displace I'd have to check my stats, but for example, that would displace all of Venezuela's oil. I mean, imagine, and it's already permitted in Canada. You got to revive those permits because they're stale a bit now. Yeah, there's my book.
I'm giving Ezra, I'm hogging it for my Amazon affiliate link. Hold on here. Let's do this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a positive book. And I'm just, I should tell you, a dozen years ago, I wrote a book called Ethical Oil, The Case for Canada's Oil Sands. I wrote it from a left-wing point of view. I thought, what do lefties care about? They care about the environment. They care about peace. They care about treatment of workers. They care about civil rights. And I said, look, by those measurements, Canadian oil sands oil is the fair trade coffee of the world's oil industry. Compared to Saudi Arabia, compared to Nigeria, you bet it is. How do they treat workers there? How do they treat the environment there?
Well, but that's why none of the policy made any sense. And even the tariffs on Teslas makes no sense, because all that it means is they're going to go buy EVs from China, EV batteries from China, who are, okay, so you can call Elon Musk a fascist and a Nazi, but then you're still buying stuff from unethical commie China.
Yeah. And that was my argument a dozen years ago. I said, look, guys, there's, no oil is perfect, but until we invent the fantasy fuel of the future that's perfect in every way, like, dilithium crystals, until we discover dilithium crystals, you're going to get your oil from somewhere. So oil from Canada is better than oil from Iran. And I think that book did well with open-minded, good faith liberals. But now we're dealing with a different set of values. America first. What is the America first value? Number one, it's move things to America that you can, like a Honda plant from Mexico. But you can't move the oil sands to America. Okay, but what if you had a free trade deal with the oil sands that literally gives you preference? Good idea. It's called the USMCA. And what if the pipeline was already partly built? You just needed to revive it. It's called Keystone XL. Add an extra 800,000 barrels right away. And what if you could sign a 50-year deal to double the production and just take it south? Now you're cooking. And that would make Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau furious because they don't like the oil sands. And again, I'm trying to think like an American. I'm trying to think like a MAGA, America First advisor to the president. If I was about to sign a $13 trillion 50-year deal with Canada for oil, you know what I would say? You better seal that border, and you better equip your military. And now you don't have an excuse of not having the money, because we're going to buy so much oil from you that you're going to have the dough. Like, I'm just trying to think the way I thought about the liberal case for the oil sands in ethical oil. What's the MAGA America First plan? It's not to push it away, because you're not hurting Trudeau by doing that. You're actually hurting U.S. refineries. I'm trying to find a way to square my love for Canada, my love for the Alberta oil sands, and my affection for Donald Trump, who I admire. And this deal is much better than a trade war, I think.
Well, and the person who might need to hear this more than anybody is probably Pierre Poilievre, who can turn this into a campaign point. And then if Carney steals it, if they don't call an election, I mean, that is a good resolution to the dispute that Poilievre might want to adopt now that Axe the Tax has been co-opted by the Liberals. Ezra, I know you got to go in a few minutes, but a couple of questions I want to make sure that Americans understand. A lot of people are saying the tariffs are pretextual for a broader scheme and have nothing to do with actual illegal, or I should say, people on terror watch lists crossing the border into the States. Fentanyl, because only 1% of the fentanyl captured is crossing from the Canadian border. I know that, well, I don't want to load it. I know it's not true, but can you flesh it out? Have you gone into the depths of the fentanyl production in Canada and its impact on the U.S.?
I don't think the 1% figure is accurate.
Mhm.
I've seen police. I saw police testimony at Parliament a couple months ago saying there were 4,000 different drug gangs in Canada. 4,000. I mean, it's enormous. Every week we have news about a huge record-setting fentanyl bust here or there, particularly in British Columbia. So I think the number is larger than the 1%. I know on the terrorism side, literally every day, the U.S. government intercepts someone coming down from Canada into the U.S. who's on a terror watch list every day. What's terrifying about that for me as a Canadian is they're released back into Canada. They are not detained in America. They're just sent back to Canada, which is very terrifying. I think Trump means it when he says he's worried about fentanyl. And if you look at, Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories, and the premier of Alberta, which is the pro-oil province, Danielle Smith, I've talked to her about these things. She says that Alberta wants to double its oil production. She wants America to take it. She was the one premier who was going down to the States and not being insulting to Trump. She actually went to his inauguration. She came to the Rumble inaugural party. I don't know if you know that. Like Danielle Smith of Alberta is putting her best foot forward. She actually deployed a serious border patrol with drones and vehicles. And like the one province in Canada that's taking the fentanyl thing extremely seriously is Alberta. So I think that you got to move away from Trudeau and Carney. I'd love it if Trump and Alberta could basically get together and do a deal. And what's Carney going to do? Nix it? I mean, God forbid. Listen, this is strange territory we're in, and we don't know what Mark Carney's actual agenda is other than wealth and power. Will he stay with his anti-oil ideology? I don't know, but I just hope that Trump, you know, that old saying, don't get mad, don't get even, get ahead. How does America get ahead? By buying all the ethical oil, by locking it in. That's the America First move. And speaking as a native Albertan and Canadian, that's a huge win for Canada too. All right, I know I'm going on full tilt here. I'm going hard, but I just hate this battle with America. It's like mom and dad fighting. You know, you don't want to see it.
What disappoints me, and it's not to be holier than thou, it's what upsets me. It's not the politicians fighting. It's seeing the Canadian population giving into this. It's a Russian, it's a Russia frenzy. I got legit friends who don't want to come to Florida anymore because they think somehow, because of this trade war among governments, the peoples of these countries have become enemies. And it's discouraging, because when you appreciate that they get their news, Ezra, unfortunately, the majority do not get it from Rebel. They get it from CBC, Global, all of the bought out news outlets that are brainwashing them into thinking Americans are their mortal enemies.
It was only 3 years ago that the trucker convoy on Ottawa, whose symbol was the Canadian flag, was demonized as far right. There were government experts who actually said the Canadian flag was a far right hate symbol. They said that. And now they're wrapping themselves in the flag and claiming to love Canada. These are the people who stripped our founding prime minister, Johnny MacDonald, off the $10 bill, who stripped the Canadian historical images out of our passport, who rewrote our national anthem. These are the people who said Canada was a genocidal state against our own Indigenous people. The people who hate Canada the most are suddenly claiming they love Canada simply as a weapon to fight Donald Trump. And so you're very wise to see through it. But there are some ordinary people who do like Canada and don't like to see it fight with America. And I think we can be best friends. We don't have to merge as a country. We can, and by the way, Americans don't want that. You don't want that. But we can be good friends and good neighbors. You know, they say good fences make good neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to strengthen the border. And I think we've got a really lucky, Canadians are so lucky that we're in the neighborhood we're in. If we were in a different part of the world, life would not be as good. And the one thing we can do is work with America on its genuine concerns, including the fact that we don't pay our fair share in the military. And no one can say we do. So that's my hope. I hope this fight will pass, because it is causing me distress to see my home country of Canada fight against my favorite neighbor, America. I hope we can get past it.
Yeah, I think we didn't even get into the immigration problems in Canada that are lending themselves to the people on terror watch list crossing into the States. But there's only so much we can cover, Ezra, in an hour. Everybody knows where they can find you. I'm going to give the link again to the book, but where can people find you? And the book is out on Amazon right now. Link.
Yeah, the book is called Deal of the Century. We have a little special website called dealofthecenturybook.com, but you can find it on Amazon. For all our news, just go to rebelnews.com. And we love Twitter also, and we love Rumble, and you can find us on all those places. Thanks for giving me so much time to talk about these things.
Any day and every day. And I hope people don't take it like I don't ask you often enough. So don't I should in every time as the door is open, but because I got more. What did I just do? I want to move this one off. I've got a lot of questions. I can keep up to speed with some of the stuff in Canada, but not by any means the depth and breadth that you cover it with. So anytime and every time.
Thanks for your hospitality, my friend. Good luck.
All right. Have a good one. That was too soon. Too hot with my fingers. Before we bring in Amir Hart, I was going to end. We're going to keep this on all platforms because there seems to be some technical issues persisting. People were saying that Rumble wasn't loading. Let me bring up just a few things before we bring in our next guest of the hour. You will have never met him. And that's going to be, this is his big break. Well, some of you might have met him. He's running for the PPC in Canada. I've never met him except on Twitter. I want to bring up this because King of Biltong is in the house, who says, looking for some healthy snacks to add to your diet, try our Biltong. Almost half protein plus is packed with B12, creatine, iron, zinc, and much more. Go to biltongusa.com, code Viva for 10% off. And then Slidey Pie says, hey, Slidey Pie. Hi, Viva. I got Louis the Lobster, and my 7- and 8-year-old grandkids liked it. They only liked it? I was expecting to see they loved it. I'm joking. Thank you very much, Slidey Pie. And enjoy it. And then there was, I can bring up the chat here like this. Hold on. There were some comments that I wanted to bring up. I love Ezra. He knows what he's talking about. Jug meat. Oh, yeah. I flagged this one because I'm not making fun of Jug meat's name. That's how you pronounce it. It's not Jag meat. He says, my name's Jug meat. You pronounce it like hug me or something stupid. But that's his name. Jug meat is how you pronounce it. So I'm not making fun of it. I just wanted everybody to know that. Viva, why did I bring this up? Ruby Dalla was more bold than Pierre on immigration. Ruby Dalla said she would deport all illegals. Oh, I know. I had her on. I was skeptical of her. I'm not skeptical of her anymore. The conservatives would be wise to adopt her quickly. Okay, bring that one out here. Then we had this. This is super chat, so I can get an answer from chat. Is Rumble refusing to load? Yeah, I saw this earlier. Viva Stream is working on Rumble. It was. People were having trouble earlier on. There's definitely, from what I understand, an attack on both Twitter and Rumble now, it would seem as well. Thank you for the super chat. Federal government isn't the only issue selling Alberta oil. Look what the Americans are paying us per barrel. Okay, that's and then hold on a second. What was this? 98% of drug cartels in the Canada work for the Canadian government. That's what I wanted to ask Ezra about. The reports that a lot of the drug there's a reason why they're trying to legalize hard drugs in Canada, and it's because connections between the people manufacturing them illegally until it's legal, people. And then we got one more here. We most certainly want Alberta and Saskatchewan to be U.S. states. The rest of Canada can fly hide in a hurricane. Well, first of all, go for big guy 911. Flying a kite in a hurricane is the best time to fly a kite. I did that actually when the hurricane came here last time, but the kite wasn't quite good enough. Do I see any more technical issues in the backdrop? Okay. And only because I got to be out of here hard out at like maybe 2 minutes to 2, because I'm going to go on Alex Jones afterwards. We are bringing in Amir Hart of the PPC. I have never met the man in person. Maybe I have, actually. I shouldn't say that because, Amir, I'm going to bring you in right now. Have we ever met in person?
Just to make sure my microphone's working.
It sounds good. You're
Perfect. All right. Excellent.
You're not in a prison cell, are you?
No, it's fantastic to meet you. I've heard about your show for a while. I've watched some of the episodes. I mean, you guys do absolutely phenomenal work. Ezra Levant as well with Rebel News. I mean, the guys out there have been seriously carrying a huge amount of like real, genuine Canadian news, giving a serious perspective during the lockdowns when a lot of the media was just blasting one-way narratives. Rebel News was able to actually kind of break through that, give an actual voice to people that were saying, hey, these things are not working. They just hurt people. They go against the values of freedom that Canadians have loved, that have grown, that have tried to maintain. I actually remember seeing David Menzies, the guy with the hat and whatnot, a few times. I've actually been interviewed by him before. I mean, these guys have done absolutely great work.
I want to shout out all of them, but I'm trying to compile a list. You got Kean Bexty. You got what's the I can't even remember now offhand. I'm putting myself under pressure. The other amazing independent Canadian journalism out there. Thornhill is in Toronto, is in Ontario, correct?
Yes, Thornhill is just outside of Toronto, where Steeles Avenue starts. It is a bit of an odd-looking writing. It's not like very easy to say what it is. Some of it stops at Rutherford Road. There's a new part that steps out a bit further than that. It mostly runs from Bayview to 400. It's a lovely area, I gotta say though. If anybody stopped by Thornhill is the absolute. It's a fantastic place to live, and it's got a wonderful community, unlike any that I've seen in an area like it. I gotta say that.
So I'm going to ask you this because there hasn't been an election triggered yet. So you're a candidate for the PPC. You're officially recognized.
Yeah, I am officially recognized by the party. I've been recognized since August, and it's been fantastic. Being able to speak with people, being able to develop and grow within the community, and we're incredibly optimistic about what we can do whenever an election is called. We're ready to go.
Here's the question. I forgot what the question was. What internally? When are you? What are the rumorings as to when an election is going to be called? Are there rumorings that Jagmeet is actually going to, support a non-confidence vote to trigger an early election?
Well, it's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because I'm hearing all sorts of different voices. But here's something: there's a few things I can say that need to be taken into account. One is, to my understanding, Mark Carney plans on running in one of the southern Edmonton ridings, whichever ones are the current ones that his father ran in back in, I think it was the 1980s, and he got second place. Whichever of those two, it does not look like he would win if an election were called. The best thing that he can do is try to wait out, see whatever he can do to try to flip those over, or it's quite frankly going to be a bit humiliating for the party leader not to win, when the more practical thing to do would be what Jagmeet did, which is throw somebody out and nab their seat.
Well, that was actually my question. People were saying Carney is not a sitting MP. He needs to be a sitting MP in order to be prime minister. I didn't think that was the case, but I admittedly don't know.
It's actually interesting. I think that we've had 3 prime ministers that were not MPs when they were made prime minister. Actually, one was a senator. This was back in the 19th century. But what should be of note is none of these prime ministers that were appointed without actual, some hand in democracy, of people saying, hey, I see this guy's the leader of a party. I think that he should be the head of government. These guys have been terrible. You look at the historical rankings. I'm thinking John Turner. I'm thinking, I believe it was Abbott. He was the prime minister that was in the Senate. I mean, these guys are not prepared for the job. They're not equipped, and they do not have the leadership qualities necessary to get involved with that. I mean,
Carney said he implied that he would not hold it. I'd be curious to know where he said that he implied it. Amir, I didn't get into my traditional intro questions. How old are you? You look very young.
20.
Oh my gosh!
Hey,
you're even younger than I thought you were.
That's not the youngest. If I'm recalling correctly, there was a member of parliament elected. They were 18. I think it was an.
Oh, actually, you're not too young for the job. You're just. I'm turning into an old man. Like you saw. Holy crap! 20 years old. Very nice. Born and raised in Thornhill?
No. I was born in the United States. I came here with my family.
I'm joking.
Yeah. Now I'm the bad guy. Now I'm
born in the States. Sorry. So where were you born in the States?
Yeah, I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, but I've lived in Canada since 2010. And I consider this place to be my home. It's where I've grown up. It's where I've gone for school. It's where I've lived my life. It's where my family, my mother has had very long roots in here since she came as a refugee, right?
From where?
Afghanistan. When the communists took over, they had fled. It was a whole journey and a half, witnessing the cruelty of the Ayatollah and witnessing the warfare on the Iraq-Iran war. Canada provided them a place to live. And every single member of my family that's from that Afghan side says a million times that Canada gave them an opportunity that few places in the world. And therefore, it is so important that we preserve that country that used to have, and I'll say this a million times because I've had some people ask, well, Amir, if you're not from Canada and your family's not from Canada, but your party is notorious for being the only party willing to say that we need to have that pause in immigration. what do you say? And I'll say this a million times: the standards have completely been dropped, and 99% of the immigrants I speak to, newcomers to Canada, they have observed that these standards have been dropped. It's been hurting the reputation of immigrants. Back in the day when it used to be, when our standards were higher, when you were bringing in immigrants, these were people that were highly educated, that people were in a controlled amount. They were the best of the best that Canada was looking for. But today, when the standards have dropped, that's not to say that the newcomers as a whole are like something that is like a hateful thing towards that. But what I'm saying is that when the standards are dropped and there's a huge amount of people coming in, entry-level jobs, for example, a lot of my friends are not able to find a job. They haven't been able to find a job in a year, and they work so hard. Some of them are even looking at even outsourcing to the States to see what they can do. And that just kind of relates to just many of the things that we've seen with like brain drain to our healthcare sector, businesses going to the States because it's more attractive. There's a million different things that need to be tackled. But to get back to the original thing, no, I'm not from Canada, but there are many people in the People's Party that are running that are not born in Canada. But I can say one thing: I've spent more time in Canada in the last 10 years than Mark Carney has. So I'll say that.
I want to pull up an article that the Jewish Federation News wrote on me. It said, "Why would a far right?" I'll pull it up in a second. Here we go. Why this? Look at this. This is the rubbish that we have to deal with in Canada. People don't seem to appreciate that the PPC is not anti-immigrant.
No,
in any way, shape, or form. It said it was anti-using immigration as a tool for population growth and
Absolutely.
as a tool for exploiting low skilled labor. Why this Jewish YouTube star ran for the People's Party? Because they call it an anti-Semitic party, despite they call it an anti-immigrant party, despite. But before we even get there, because your mom's from Afghanistan, may I ask how old your mother is?
I don't recall. Because look, when you're on the run for your life, right? The details of that. Also, you know, you don't ask about the age and whatnot.
No, just saying, it's just like it's to me, it's surreal that I'm probably obviously much closer in age to your mother than to you. But your mom comes here. I noticed that when I was at the Ottawa protest, I was talking with. I don't believe that I think I met one or two from Afghanistan, but there were Venezuela, Eastern Bloc, Egypt, and every one of them said, I see infiltrating Canada what I fled from fill in the blank. Does your mother have a similar observation?
What needs to be understood absolutely a million times over is when you have uncontrolled mass immigration, we do not have the ability as a country to vet who's coming in, what's going on. We've had people plotting terrorist attacks in Canada, which if you even tried to imagine that back when we had proper standards for immigration, what I've seen is that in Thornhill, there's a very strong Iranian community, right? And these are people who fled the Ayatollah. When we see uncontrolled immigration, we don't know who's coming in. We do not have those controls to keep people safe, to keep people protected. I know in Thornhill, as a result of ongoing conflicts, such as the Israel-Hamas conflict, there has been a soar in anti-Semitic violence committed against people, even within the community. I've seen at some of these events where people are being targeted, even children. And one of the things that are observed across the board by immigrants in this country that I've spoken to is a lot of the things that they had ran from, which is whether it be radical extremism, whether it be, for example, even like with the CCP and the secret police stations that they were running, the Chinese Communist Party, to target and harass and torment people that had fled their regime. How is that getting in here? Well, if we had a controlled system on who was coming in, we would be able to have a hell of a lot better job at knowing what's happening, who's coming in, and who needs to go.
I mean, so the immigration policy is one thing that the PPC is, I believe, misrepresented on, but set that aside. I do want to, the reality on the ground, is it Brampton, Ontario? Where is it that we're seeing videos where there was the video from the police that they put out? I believe they put out a video in Punjab. Like we're seeing videos of Canadian municipalities, is the right word, that I say it's not that they don't look Canadian, because that wrongly presumes that Canadians are all white. we're seeing
the indigenous would have a word.
Oh no, I know, but we're seeing communities that are speaking neither English nor French, to the point where police are having to put out official police videos in Punjab. What's the reality, and what is the conservative policy on this, and how does it differ from the PPC?
Well, when it comes to, well, you can see very clearly, we've got in the People's Party of Canada, we have people from different backgrounds and whatnot, but what is their messaging? Their messaging is not, let me try to target, like, for example, I live in Thornhill. Thornhill has it is the riding with the highest percentage of Jewish people in the country. But I will not try to exploit that, for example, by trying to walk into a synagogue with a kippah on, trying to tell people, oh, let me use your identity against you. I'm going to, instead of telling you how I'm going to help you, whether you're white, black, man, woman, straight, gay, whatever, instead of trying to say, hey, here's how I can help you regardless of who you are, I'm saying, hey, I'm going to use your feelings. And what is using feelings instead of actual policy in politics? It's demagoguery. You're being a demagogue. And you look at what the People's Party does. We absolutely never, ever do that. Ever. Does not matter who you are. Maxime Bernier said best. He said it a few years ago. He was asked what he would do for the Muslim community in Canada. And his answer was, he will do nothing just for the Christians, just for the Muslims, just for anybody. He said he's going to do it for Canadians. Whatever he can, it is for all Canadians. But you look at what the People's Party of Canada is doing. Conservative Party of Canada is doing. They have no issue playing dress up. I noticed everybody stopped talking about Justin Trudeau playing dress up. He would go in all these outfits and whatnot.
Well, I mean, Doug Ford was the most recent one to dress in.
Yeah.
It's so patronizing, and it's so to me, it's irritating. But then people accuse it of, I don't think I would do it. Just people say it's a matter of respect. You go, but it's not. It's a matter of pandering. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off there, because Doug Ford, if you haven't seen it, go look it up. It's laughably stupid.
It's terrible, because I take a look at that and I say, you are not looking at these people as actual humans. You are seeing them as identities to grab and use that to manipulate them. And that's how we're not going to get actual solutions. Instead of talking about, hey, do we need to have tax reform? Do we need to have immigration reform? Do we need to have healthcare reform? Do we need to look at all these things? Do we need to reform what we're doing with Indigenous communities to actually build a relationship, not on trying to victimize them, but trying to actually have respect built and to build forward to advance our relationships? Instead, you can just say, well, you're Christian, Jewish, or Muslim. Let me just hang around. Let me do all these things with you. So I make you think I'm on your side. Meanwhile, the second I walk into Parliament, I could be voting against you. You really want to know? Because a lot of these, like some of these MPs never even speak in Parliament. They never introduce anything. They're called ghost MPs. Actually, this is just an interesting note. One of the most prominent of these is in Beauce, where Maxime Bernier used to represent.
And for those who don't know, La Beauce is a région in Quebec. It's east of Quebec City. It's rural Quebec, very French. I mean, it's 99.9% French, and it's a small town Quebec as you can get. It's beautiful. I had a bunch of friends because I went to school in Quebec City. But okay, sorry, carry on.
Well, yeah, and Richard Lahoe is the MP there, but he does not do anything really. He's barely got a social media presence. Actually, the youth wing, New Generation PPC, did a bit of a deep dive into that and looked into that this guy just does not get active in his community. Meanwhile, I remember I was with Maxime Bernier. I was speaking to him about a year ago, and we were discussing about how he was engaged with his community. I was like, yeah, I remember you had been at a rodeo out there. He was like, really? You know about the rodeo? 10 years ago, to show that he's actually engaged with the community, that he was going out there, he wrestled, I think it was a pig. And he was so proud when he saw that I could get out the image where he soaked the mud, giving a big thumbs up, because he was able to do it. And that is a pretty damn hard thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
People in the chat are asking for PPC policies. I presume, look, we'll go one by one. Immigration is, I won't fill in the blank. That won't be fair of me. Immigration we've covered. It was never anti-immigrant, but it was against using it as I've said this so many times now. Like, Canada promotes abortion. Medical assistance in dying, state-sanctioned murder is now the fourth leading cause of death. And then they say population's not growing. We got to import your replacement. We're seeing a lot of social strife as a result of current immigration policies, terror issues as well. The hard litmus test ones. Like, what does the PPC stand for?
Well, regarding specifically in terms of immigration, or you mentioned a few things there.
Well, I could do a bunch. I mean, because I know the answer to all of them, but let's just say like the core litmus test. What's the position on abortion?
Sure. I can tell you when it comes to the People's Party's official position on abortion, when we take a look at it's a serious issue, because a lot of people view it as, is it a woman's autonomy? Is this a human life that's being put at risk? There's religious elements that come into it. There's even secular moral arguments. There's looking at the cost. Should it be taxpayer funded? What I can say at the moment is the People's Party is saying that we need to at least have that debate, because it's such a tense subject. We saw just recently in the United States, there was huge tensions over abortion. It impacted their election substantially. Should Canada, as a democracy, have the ability for a debate on abortion? I think absolutely, and so does the party, because we're for democracy. You want to have these discussions. If you don't have these discussions, what will happen? You are actually trying to have extremism grow in your country, because that's the only place where people will be able to express themselves. And furthermore, we want to actually align Canada with what other countries are doing in terms of abortion. Now, first things first, People's Party MPs, if we get elected, and we're looking at a few ridings very closely, they will be free to have whatever position they choose, because at the end of the day, the will of their constituents and the position will heavily differ. I mean, Canada's a massive country, right? When it comes to abortion, places like most countries, I understand, like with Europe, a lot of people have this idea that Europe is going to have absolute, total, free, unrestricted abortion. But what should be noted is that there are a ton of countries that have restricted after the first trimester. Late-term abortions are totally prohibited. There is no reason why Canada should not take a look at even European nations and say, hey, if they're recognizing that there are serious moral issues with going into a late term or after the first trimester and whatever, that should kind of be the bottom line of, look, at the very minimum, that's a serious issue. So that's what I'll say is the official party platform.
Our viewers know that Canada is, I believe, the only nation on earth with absolutely no criminal prohibitions on abortion at any point in time. Practically, you won't find a doctor to do it, but be that as it may. I'll ask you the tough question, because everybody asks, and I hear the argument all the time. Maxime is not going to win, and I think I have to agree with Ezra. It would be he won't be prime minister. God willing, he'll get his seat and maybe one or two others. The vote splitting argument. Is there a compelling argument against the idea that voting for the PPC is a wasted vote and everyone should vote for the Conservatives because it's the only hope, if not necessarily not the best hope?
I can tell you this. I did research into that because I want to know, is it true? Is the People's Party of Canada responsible for why the Conservatives lost the last election? I looked into it. I seriously looked into it because, well, if I'm with a party, I should know what are we actually impacting. I looked into it. No, the idea, it's actually a myth that the People's Party of Canada is just all Conservative Party supporters. Research that we've done shows that we have a profound amount of ex-Green, ex-NDP, ex-Liberal as well, and a ton of non-voters. People consistently say, if the People's Party didn't exist tomorrow, I was not going to vote. I am not going to vote. People that I'm meeting that say, hey, I'm not going to, hey, I don't know what the People's Party of Canada is. I explain it to them and they say, wow, that's great. I've never heard a party that actually listens to me. So even if the People's Party disappeared tomorrow, there is a very strong chance that you would not see that shift. I know that if you look in Ontario and a lot of Ontario ridings, a lot of you see a drop in the support for the Greens. All of a sudden, you see a soaring increase for the People's Party. Why is that? Because a lot of people saw that the Greens were kind of this alternative to what was going on with the establishment in Ottawa. But now they see, okay, there's a real option now, and that's the People's Party of Canada. Furthermore, vote splitting, if tomorrow, let's say the People's Party brokered a deal and said we'll give 100% of our votes to the Conservatives, we just won't run. and all the People's Party of Canada guys went to the Conservatives. Will that actually reflect what the Conservative Party will do? They'll say, well, they vote for us. Who cares? Let's get our policies through. That's how politics work. You have to satisfy your lobbyists. And the People's Party of Canada has zero lobbyists. We have zero at all. I've actually had people try to come up to me and say, hey, I want to see if I can impact the party's policy, even you as a candidate. Would you be like, if we helped with your campaign financially, if we helped fund the party, would you guys take the money? And I can tell you, we literally laughed that guy off. It's not happening. It's about putting the democratic will of people first, not what lobbyists are trying to pressure you into.
Well, it's an interesting argument, actually, that if the PPC don't vote for the PPC, they're not split voters. They're new voters that are voting PPC. That's an interesting argument. There was one riding that was the quintessential example of how the PPC split the Conservative vote such that it went to a Liberal. I forget which riding it was. It was back in 2021. Okay, well, fair enough, and people will vote with their conscience, hopefully. So we got. I mean, abortion, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a litmus test. It's just a divisive question. What are the biggest policy changes that the PPC would implement in Canada? And while you answer it, I'm going to disappear for 5 seconds to let my dog out, but I can still hear you.
No issue. I would say that there are many policies which are not often discussed that are absolutely massive in its implications for Canada's future. We are looking at electoral reform. We're looking at what is the best option for Canadians, not even just our party, but what is the best option for Canadians? Because everybody is basically saying right now, especially if we're looking at a potential minority government with the Liberals, some polls are saying that, what should be done? You look at what's been going on with other provinces. We're a totally disproportionate amount, like even in Ontario, 40% of the vote, but a supermajority of power. Basically 100% of legislative power within the party. Healthcare, the Canada Health Act, to basically simplify it, says the federal government can provide funding to provinces and territories so long as they guarantee universal healthcare. But what does this result in? You have a lot of people that came into Canada that never put taxes into the healthcare system. Mm-hmm. You have doctors saying, well, I can get paid more in the United States. I'll go there. I'm more respected for my services. So you have people, I've waited in an emergency room for, I think it was like 10 hours. It was actually just after I went canvassing all day during the Toronto-St. Paul's by-election. And I remember I saw a guy there with an IV bag that went right to his heart. And I spoke to the guys. I brought all the drinks that I had from my car because they weren't used during the canvassing. People relaxed, started to chill. And I asked him, hey, how long have you been waiting? Because the sign was going up and was saying it was going to be 10 hours.
He'd been there for 16 hours.
Yeah, I mean, he had been there for 20.
Shut. I mean, we know this. There are websites where you can track the wait times in ERs, and if you're fortunate to live in a small town that doesn't have a big population, 4 or 5 hours. Some of these places 18 to 24 hours, sometimes more. It's okay. Sorry. It's obscene.
I mean, one of my best friends, he had a concussion. He went to go see the doctor to go to a hospital. The waiting was so long that he literally just figured it was best if he just went home and risked it. And that should not exist in Canada, a very developed country. What used to be the most highly developed nation on the planet in the 1990s. And that's our healthcare system. I have friends of mine that even such as international students that were told, hey, just stay in India, get the healthcare there. It's going to be safer and faster. So what's the People's Party offering? Well, we want to scrap the Canada Health Act and we want to offer 2-tier healthcare system. What does that mean? Well, it means publicly funded healthcare still, right? So you still have the option. If you cannot afford it, we see that there are issues in the United States with affordability, but Canadians should still have the option to get that healthcare. I've known people that have had permanent injuries because of how long they've had to wait for surgery. People have died in Canada because they've been waiting for treatment. We need to give people that option to access healthcare that quickly. And people are worried, well, isn't that going to be super expensive? Well, if there's private healthcare, it will balance out how much people will be charging in their private healthcare practices. The implications of that could be enormous. It could astronomically increase the health of this country and save lives. What the number is, I don't think that we can really nail down.
This is just from the National Post. More than 74,000 have died on healthcare wait lists. This is not the ER one. The number was less for the ER, thank goodness. But the question is this: the argument is always that if you have the half-half private public, you're going to draw the doctors out of the public sphere into the private sphere, and then you're going to have the same problem, not just a two-tier system, but only the rich getting the heck is geez. Okay, we're gonna give me a sec. Amir.
Yep.
I didn't realize it's 1:54. I gotta go on with Alex Jones. Crab apples. Sorry about this. Okay, I'm totally distracted. Where can people find? Sorry, but about the abrupt ending, I forgot. I got to go at 2:00 to do Alex Jones and talk about Canada.
Yep.
Where can people find you? How can they support you for what you're doing now?
Well, this will be a bit easy for me. I've got my business card here, and on the back you can find my contacts. If this is reversed for some reason, you can find me on X at @HeartPPC. You can email me if you're within my riding at amir.hart@teamppc.ca. Let me know your concerns or observations. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. If you text me, you're from my riding, I would love to hear from you. But I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to be on your show. I loved our discussion. I'd love if there is an opportunity.
You come back anytime there's something to talk about. I'm going to get Max back on, and I ran an NDG, and Max and I are close. So look, I appreciate the arguments for the votes. Oh gosh, it's coming back. Okay, I got to do it. Amir, let me get back to my window here. Thank you very much, Amir. We'll definitely keep in touch.
Yep, and I'll say absolutely 100%. For everybody watching, now's the time for reform.
Amazing. Everybody, I'm ending the stream. Locals, Rumble, everybody. There has been an attack on X and Rumble today, so that's why I was a little glitchy. I'm going on Alex Jones, so go check that out right now. Amir, everyone, peace out.